from Tokyo, and Tokyo could transmit this down to Truk, which is one of their big naval bases. It could send it down to Surabaya, and Surabaya would send it back. They always did it 3 times. 3 times. The idea was each of the transmissions were covering a different area, and therefore there was maximum coverage. That was the system they used. That's how it operated. I don't know whether our Navy did the same. Well, you might tell me one day, but that's how they did it. And what we had to do was we went into a system of watchkeeping on this naval base at a place called HMS Anderson. Again, it was not afloat, it was a shore base, a massive listening station. We've heard all about them today, of course, with the trouble down at Cheltenham and elsewhere. And we were listening to the Japanese right throughout the war. The codes had been broken before the war by the Americans. They used 2 codes, primarily, in the Navy. One called Purple, which was a Kana code. I read very little of that personally. And the other was a cipher. It was a machine code. And both codes had been broken by the Americans before the war started. The information is in a book here called The Code Breakers by David Kahn, and that's what I got the information from. Because in intelligence, you were on a need-to-know basis. I never knew what happened to the messages I wrote down. I didn't know what they used them for. I had horrible thoughts at one time they might be using them for a purpose that might not well be intended. But we just didn't see them, we just copied them. They were taken in triplicate, and they were in watches, 4 watches. We call them A, B, C, and D. We didn't call them port and starboard and so on. A, B, C, and D. And A and B watches would work naval watches, that's 4 hours about, except for the dog watches, which were from 4 to 6 and 6 to 8 in the evening. That was to change the watches about, so they had different runs ashore. And you came off after 24 hours and you stood down and had 24 hours with nothing to do. And I thought, well, this is terrific, you know, nothing to do, this is marvellous. Every other day off. You know, why the hell have they given us it? We soon found out why you had every other day off. The work was very, very demanding. I'm going to actually show you the kind of traffic that we took. Incidentally, you might wonder where I've got all this from all these years later. They were from notes that I took down many years ago when I prepared the talk for the Wirral Amateur Radio Society, and I've kept copies of them. So this is a message from Sionan, which was Singapore before the Japs took it. They use the French from, as we do, DE, and tack line, query G6, that's Surabaya. That's a bit of romance. If you've got a tent and a tent on its side, that was top priority. Top priority. Let's get this other thing out of the way. Top priority. YA 42, which is W42 in English, meant there were 42 groups. They use the double break as we do, even though they also use it as a B-bar. But you knew whereabouts in the text it was, which way to write it. Then you had to write the addressees down the page. And I thought, well, this is crazy, you know, I'm not Japanese, why should I have to write it down the page? But there was a good reason for this, as you'll see in a minute. These could be ships, shore stations, officers, admirals, people. They were all coded, and we'd broken their code, so we knew precisely where the stuff was going. And I'm going to try and make this more or less how it came. They used bug keys. They'd learned them from the Americans, and they sent very quickly and very, very accurately. And this is how it came. Sorry. Sorry, say again. Sorry, say again. And so on. until the end of the traffic, sorry, which is the equivalent of our end of text. And it came at you like that. Now, they sent it 3 times. There were 3 operating on the one frequency, and the station would give a receipt and would send it again, and the 3rd station would acknowledge. Okay, now you say, great, if I've forgotten something or I've missed something, I can pick it up, you know, but you can't, because you had to copy it first time, because you then had to translate this into Kana sounds for the cryptanalysts, the people who were reading the codes. So C-bar 10-4, they wouldn't know what the hell that was, but they know SAT-ACO 4 is Shonan, you see. And in intelligence, you're on a need-to-know basis. They didn't know the Morse, we didn't know the codes, and that's the way the thing worked. Did anyone spot my deliberate mistake, by the way? I niggeried when I should have hand-niggeried. The most important code group, by the way, is that one there. Always look for that one. That's a very important code group there. It was my mum's co-op number. It was, actually. Yeah. The Japanese, meantime, his operator, all that he would do would go down the addresses, and he'd write it in Kana. And if his address isn't among there, not listed, he doesn't take it. He sends for another bottle of sake wine and a comfort girl. Okay? But we had to read the lot. And it was very, very stressing indeed, very stressing. We used to wear our headphones a bit forward of our ears, didn't we, Bill? Will. I only just met Will properly tonight. Just forward of our ears, and I've always worn them like that since. So you can hear what's going on about you. And you could hear the commotion sometimes. It normally happened about 2 in the morning. And you'd look up and there's a fellow with a pair of headphones, and he's flinging them at his receiver and saying, goodness gracious me, dear, dear. All words to that effect. And what happened? It cracked. The stress of it, the fact that you had to catch it first time, the fact that it was fast, and the fact that you never knew what the hell they were going to do with it anyway, was very stressing. And fellas used to crack. And what happened, they just send them up country to a place called Dietalawa, and they give them about 3 weeks leave, and they'd come back refreshed and crack again. But there was one particular fellow there. He was an old man. He must have been at least, oh yes, getting on for 30 years of age. But when you're 18 or 19, anyone 30's got one foot in the grave, right? And this fellow's name was Boyd, Bill Boyd. And the officer of the watch was a warrant telegraphist, another Bill called Bill Fincham, and these 2 people were most unlike. Bill Fincham was rough as a bear's bum. He only knew 2 languages, English and bad. And he and I, for some strange reason, got on like a house on fire. But he didn't go much on Bill Boyd. Bill was a schoolmaster from a very well-known public school in Yorkshire. He was a classics master. He spoke and wrote Greek and Latin fluently. He was a religious man, but he was a very likable little fellow. But he was getting on, you see. He was 30, and in those small hours, 2 in the morning, he would sometimes nod off. If you've operated in CW contests, I was just talking to Dave earlier on about field day, and you get that dreadful time at midnight or later on when things are bad. And this used to happen. The frequencies would go dead. And Bill used to have his hand on the HRO dial, a big dial about this big. And then his head would go on his hand. And then the next thing he'd be off, you see, he'd be asleep. And the output from the receivers came out to jacks underneath, a pair of them, so the officer of the watch could come in and plug in and take what you were reading and just look at you, just to check. They rarely did it, but it was there. But what we did, we used to plug into Bill's set and see if his frequency was lively. And if it wasn't, we'd leave him. Well, one morning, Bill was caught, unfortunately, by Fincham. And Bill Fincham sneaked up, and he did probably one of the most horrible things, really. He just pull the logbook. Incidentally, as well as taking this stuff in triplicate, you have to keep a running log of all the procedural signals, frequency changes and things like this. And he pulled this log. Now, we know that a naval log is gold, isn't it? When there was all that business that he couldn't find the log of that submarine, as an ex-Navy man, he must have been laughing his socks off and so on. You don't lose logs, there's no way. They're gold. You're not allowed to alter them. If something's gone wrong, you're allowed to put a line across it and initial it and put the correction underneath, but leave the original mistake in. And yet Bill Fincham sneaked this log from under him, and he wrote this on it. I've tried to reproduce the log as it was. I didn't see this, it was reported to me. There is what he's been copying. TZ means there's nothing doing, just making sure they're still listening. 0, 0, 0. And he wrote across it, asleep on watch, and signed it W. Fincham. And just walked away. Left him sleeping, and walked into his little office in the corner. And as soon as he'd gone, of course, the lads were kicking him like this. And I'm told old Bill, 30, old Bill, wakes up, he wore very thick glasses, and he kind of rubs his eyes, and he's a Yorkshireman, he looks out and he goes, oh, oh, and he reaches for his pen, and he writes that. You see, Bill was a highly intelligent man, and like most intelligent men, he didn't wear it on his sleeve. He kept it to himself. And he said, sod it in effect, you know. And